The homeless veteran who saved a drowning dog from the river never realized the owner would give him a home and job. That's how life works sometimes. Random acts of kindness colliding with desperate moments, creating miracles neither party saw coming. Michael Brennan huddled deeper into his worn military jacket as the December wind cut through the thin fabric like it wasn't even there. 3 winters on the streets had taught him every trick for survival, but nothing prepared you for the bone-deep chill of another night without walls. His fingers, red and cracked, clutched the small medal of valor in his pocket, the last reminder of who he'd been before everything fell apart. The river path was his preferred route between the shelter and the small bridge underpass he called home. Fewer people, fewer stairs, fewer moments of having to see himself reflected in pitying eyes. The waters of the Kensington River moved dark and fast after the recent rains, swollen beyond their banks, churning with dangerous currents that matched the turbulence in his mind. Michael's demons had followed him home from Afghanistan. Nightmares populated with faces he couldn't save, sounds of explosions that never quite faded, and a persistent feeling that he'd left the best parts of himself buried in foreign soil. The VA hospital had medications. The system had programs, but somehow he'd slipped through every crack, each failure compounding until homelessness wasn't a fear, but a reality. He was halfway across the pedestrian bridge when he heard it, a desperate splashing and a high-pitched yelp that cut through the ambient noise of rushing water. Michael stopped, listened. There it was again, frantic paddling and a panicked animal cry. His eyes scanned the water, finally catching sight of a small shape being swept downstream, struggling against the current. A dog, golden-colored and clearly exhausted, its head barely above water as it fought the river's pull. Michael didn't think. Some instincts remained intact despite everything he'd lost. He dropped his backpack, everything he owned in the world, and raced down the embankment. His heart pounded a military cadence in his chest as his feet hit the muddy shore. "Hold on," he shouted, though he knew the animal couldn't understand. The words were more for himself, a command to the parts of him that still responded to purpose and duty. The water hit him like a physical blow, stealing his breath. Numbingly cold, it soaked through his clothes in seconds, the weight immediately dragging at his limbs. Michael pushed forward, powerful strokes carrying him toward the struggling animal. His muscles, weakened by months of poor nutrition, screamed in protest. The dog was tiring, its movements becoming more erratic. Michael could see the panic in its eyes when it spotted him, that universal fear of drowning that transcended species. 10 more strokes. 5. The current pulled at them both, threatening to sweep them further downstream where the river narrowed and grew more treacherous. "I've got you," Michael gasped as his hand finally closed around the scruff of the dog's neck. The animal didn't fight him, seeming to understand immediately that this human meant safety. Instead, it went almost limp, conserving energy as Michael began the much harder journey back to shore. Every yard was a battle. The cold sapped his strength. The current pushed against their bodies. Michael's vision tunneled, narrowing to just the distant shoreline. One stroke, another. His lungs burned. His arms felt like lead, but clutched against his chest was a heartbeat not his own, a life depending entirely on his refusal to give up. When his feet finally touched bottom, Michael stumbled forward, half walking, half crawling up the muddy bank, with the dog cradled against him. They collapsed together on the shore, both shivering violently, both alive. "You're okay," Michael whispered, his voice raw as he ran a trembling hand over the dog's wet fur. "You're gonna be okay." The dog, some kind of retriever mix, looked at Michael with chocolate eyes that held no judgment, no pity, just a pure, uncomplicated gratitude that pierced straight through the armor he'd built around his heart. It whimpered softly and pressed closer to his chest, seeking warmth. "Where's your home, buddy?" Michael asked, checking for a collar. There was one, a blue nylon band with tags that jingled as the dog shook itself. "Someone's missing you." The name on the tag read Einstein, with a phone number and address in the Northridge neighborhood, one of the affluent areas across town. Michael sighed. The likelihood of someone there welcoming a dripping homeless veteran to their door was slim, but the dog Einstein needed to go home. He gathered his backpack and wrapped his one spare shirt around the still shivering animal. Together they began walking, Michael's clothes plastered to his skin, his teeth chattering uncontrollably. The walk to Northridge would take over an hour, but what choice did he have? Einstein limped slightly but stayed glued to Michael's side, occasionally looking up as if to check that his rescuer was still there. The strange pair drew stares from passers-by. A homeless man and a golden retriever, both soaking wet, moving with shared purpose through the gathering dusk. By the time they reached the address, a large craftsman home set back from the street behind a wrought iron fence, darkness had fallen completely. Lights glowed warmly from inside, and Michael could see a Christmas tree twinkling in the front window. He hesitated at the gate, suddenly acutely aware of his appearance. Filthy, wet, a stranger approaching a nice home after dark. "This is where we part ways, buddy," he told Einstein, his voice rough with emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel in months. The dog whined, pressing against his legs. Michael's finger hovered over the intercom button. A final moment of connection before returning to invisibility. Then he pressed it, stepping back immediately to appear less threatening. The voice that answered was female, tight with barely controlled emotion. "Yes? Who is it?" Michael cleared his throat. "I found a dog. The tag says Einstein?" From this address, the intercom went silent. Then the gate buzzed loudly and began to swing open. Before Michael could retreat, the front door of the house flew open, and a woman rushed out, barefoot despite the cold, her face streaked with tears. "Einstein!" she cried. The dog's reaction was immediate, a joyful bark and a surge forward, tail whipping back and forth like a flag in high wind. The reunion made Michael's chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't quite name. Joy for the animal, certainly, but tinged with the sharp edge of his own isolation. He started to back away, his purpose fulfilled, when the woman looked up from where she knelt, embracing Einstein. "Wait," she called. "Please wait." Something in her voice stopped him. She was perhaps in her late 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail and red-rimmed eyes that suggested she'd been crying long before he rang the intercom. "You found him? In the river?" she asked, taking in Michael's sodden clothes and the mud caked to his pants. Michael nodded. He was being swept downstream. "I was just in the right place." "You went into the river? In this weather?" Her eyes widened as she truly saw him for the first time. The worn clothing, the gaunt face, the military bearing that never quite leaves a soldier. "You saved his life." Michael shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. "Anyone would have." "No," she said quietly. "They wouldn't have. Please come inside." "You're freezing." Michael took a step back. "That's not necessary, ma'am. I just wanted to make sure he got home safe." "I insist." Her voice was gentle but firm. "My name is Laura. Laura Hendricks. At least let me give you some dry clothes and a hot meal. It's the least I can do." Before he could protest further, Einstein settled the matter by returning to Michael's side, gripping the edge of his jacket with gentle teeth, tugging him toward the house with surprising strength. The gesture made Laura smile through her tears. "He doesn't do that with just anyone," she said. "He's choosing you." Something about those words, "he's choosing you," broke through Michael's resistance. When was the last time anyone had chosen him? For anything? The inside of the house was warm, almost uncomfortably so after so long in the cold. Rich smells of cooking food filled the air, and Michael's stomach cramped painfully in response. Laura led him to a guest bathroom, handing him a stack of men's clothes with tags still attached. "These were meant to be Christmas presents," she explained, "for my brother, but he's overseas until spring. Please use them." The shower was the first proper one Michael had had in weeks. He stood under the hot spray until his skin turned pink, watching as the water at his feet ran from muddy brown to clear. The face that looked back at him from the mirror afterward was a stranger's, clean-shaven from his weekly visits to the Veterans Outreach Center, but hollow-cheeked and haunted-eyed. The clothes fit well enough: jeans, a flannel shirt, thick socks. When Michael emerged from the bathroom, he found Laura in the kitchen, setting a third place at a table already prepared for two. "I hope you like lasagna," she said, not looking up. "It's nothing fancy." Thank you, ma'am. But I should go." The warmth, the normalcy, the domesticity, it all felt like a cruel reminder of everything he'd lost. Laura straightened, meeting his eyes directly. "My husband will be home any minute. He'd never forgive me if I let you leave without properly thanking you." She hesitated. Einstein was his service dog. After 3 tours in Iraq, Ryan, he needs him. Michael felt something shift in his understanding. "Your husband is military?" She nodded. "Marines. He works with the Veterans Affairs Office now." Before Michael could respond, the front door opened and a man's voice called out, "Laura!" The shelter said they haven't seen. Ryan Hendricks stopped in the doorway to the kitchen, taking in the scene. His wife, his dog, now clean and sporting a bandage on one paw, and a stranger in new clothes. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the unmistakable posture of a career military man. "Einstein's home," Laura said simply. This is Michael. He pulled him from the river. Ryan's eyes found Michael's, recognition passing between them. The unspoken understanding that exists between those who have seen the same darkness. You went into Kensington River? In December? Ryan asked. Michael straightened slightly. Yes, sir. Couldn't let him drown. Ryan crossed the room in 3 strides and extended his hand. Army? Yes, sir. 10th Mountain Division. Afghanistan? 3 tours. Something in Ryan's face softened. You saved more than a dog today. When Einstein didn't come back, he cleared his throat. Well, let's just say those demons get pretty loud without him. The meal that followed was the first time in years Michael had sat at a proper table with others. The conversation was careful at first. Neutral topics, the weather, the approaching holidays. But gradually Ryan began asking questions that went deeper, about Michael's service, his return home. And Michael, to his own surprise, answered. The words came haltingly at first, then more freely. The IED that had taken half his unit, the nightmares, the failed treatments, the lost job, the eviction, the slow slide into homelessness when his support systems crumbled. The system failed you, Ryan said simply when Michael finally fell silent. It happens to too many of us. Laura, who had been quiet throughout much of the story, suddenly spoke up. The guest house is empty. Ryan looked at her, something passing between them without words. We've been talking about finding someone, Laura continued, for the property management position. Since David left, Michael frowned, not understanding. Ryan took over. We own several small apartment buildings in the area. Need someone on site at our main property. The job comes with the guest house here and a salary. He paused. It's not charity. We genuinely need the help. Michael stared at them both, searching for the pity he'd grown so accustomed to seeing. Instead, he found only steady respect in Ryan's eyes and genuine hope in Laura's. I can't, he began. Just think about it. Ryan interrupted. Tonight you take the guest house regardless. It's too cold for anyone to be outside. Later in the small but immaculate guest house behind the main home, Michael sat on the edge of a real bed, overwhelmed by the day's events. Einstein had followed him out, apparently having appointed himself Michael's personal guardian, and now lay across the doorway as if to prevent his escape. Not giving me much choice, are you? Michael asked the dog, who thumped his tail in response but didn't move. Sleep came more easily than it had in years, though the nightmares still found him. He woke gasping at 3 a.m., disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. But before panic could fully take hold, a warm weight settled beside him. Einstein, somehow sensing his distress, pressed against his side. The simple contact anchored him back to reality. Good boy, Michael whispered, his hand finding the dog's soft fur in the darkness. By morning, Michael had convinced himself that the job offer had been a momentary impulse from the Hendricks, one they'd likely regret in the clear light of day. He dressed in his own clothes, now clean and dried, and prepared to thank them and leave. But when he emerged from the guest house, he found Ryan in the backyard, drinking coffee at a small patio table where breakfast for 2 had been laid out. Sleep okay? Ryan asked, not commenting on Michael's obvious preparations for departure. Better than usual, Michael admitted, reluctantly taking the offered seat. Einstein has that effect. Ryan sipped his coffee. Laura's already at work. She's an elementary school principal, but she left the property management details on the table. He nodded toward a folder. In case you're interested. Michael hesitated, then opened it. Inside were descriptions of duties, salary information, and photos of a small apartment complex not far away. Why would you do this? He finally asked. You don't know me. Ryan set down his cup. When I came back from my last tour, I was a mess. Worse than the time before? PTSD, anger issues, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. VA had me on meds that made me a zombie. He glanced toward the house. Almost lost Laura. Almost lost everything. He reached down to stroke Einstein's head. Then a program paired me with this guy. Started turning things around. Got connected to better treatment. Found a counselor who actually got it. Eventually started working with other vets. Ryan met Michael's eyes directly. Someone reached out a hand to me when I was drowning. Not in a river, but drowning all the same. I promised myself I'd do the same when I could. And the job? It's real? Michael couldn't keep the skepticism from his voice. Very real. Last manager left us in a bind. We need someone reliable who can handle maintenance calls, keep an eye on things, deal with tenants. Pays enough to live on, plus the housing here. Ryan shrugged. You have management experience from before, according to what you told us last night. And military men tend to be reliable. The opportunity before him seemed impossible. Too good, too convenient, too much like the second chance he'd stopped believing in. But as Michael looked down at Einstein, now resting his head on Michael's knee, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Possibility. "I'd need to get proper clothes," he said finally. "For a job like that." Ryan's face broke into a smile. "I think we can figure something out." The first few weeks were the hardest. Michael would wake disoriented, convinced he'd find himself back under the bridge. The routines of normal life felt foreign. Regular meals, a shower whenever he wanted, keys to a place he could call his own. He approached the property management job with military precision, perhaps overcompensating for his fear of failure. The apartment complex he managed was small, just 12 units, but it kept him busy with everything from leaky faucets to tenant disputes. Ryan was patient, teaching him the systems, introducing him to the residents as our new manager, a fellow veteran. That introduction, the respect in Ryan's voice, the way he emphasized Michael's service rather than his recent circumstances, helped ease the transition. The residents, mostly working-class families and a few retirees, accepted him without question. Einstein became the bridge between Michael's old life and new one. The dog split his time between the main house and the guest house, somehow intuiting when Michael's demons were at their worst. On particularly bad nights, when memories of Afghanistan broke through his defenses, Michael would wake to find Einstein already there, a steady presence that grounded him back to reality. Laura, too, became an unexpected ally. She approached Michael's trauma not with pity, but with practical compassion, leaving books about PTSD recovery on his doorstep, casually mentioning a veterans art therapy group that met at her school after hours. "No pressure," she'd say, "just information." Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Michael began to rebuild. He started attending the art therapy sessions, surprised to find that his hands, once steady enough to disarm explosives, could also create something beautiful. He reconnected with the VA, this time with Ryan's guidance navigating the bureaucracy that had defeated him before. Spring came, bringing with it a physical transformation of the Hendricks property that mirrored Michael's internal one. He found himself spending weekends helping Ryan build a new deck, the physical labor and easy camaraderie healing something deep within him. It was during one of these building sessions, almost 6 months after the river rescue, that Ryan broached the subject they'd all carefully avoided. "You ever think about reaching out to your family?" Michael's hammer paused mid-swing. His family, the parents who hadn't understood his post-war struggles, the sister whose wedding he'd missed during his darkest period, the shame had been too much to overcome. "They probably don't want to hear from me," he said finally. Ryan shrugged. "You might be surprised. People can change. Perspectives can shift." That night, Michael stared at his phone for hours, Einstein watching him with those knowing eyes. Finally, with fingers that trembled slightly, he dialed his sister's number. The conversation was awkward, tearful, but real. She had been searching for him, it turned out, had filed missing persons reports, had never stopped hoping. "We didn't understand," she admitted, her voice breaking over the line. "But we never stopped loving you, Mike." 2 weeks later, Michael stood nervously at the airport arrival gate. Einstein beside him, now officially registered as a support animal for Michael as well as Ryan. When his sister emerged from the security area, she stopped, taking in the sight of her brother. Clean, healthy, standing straight. A far cry from the hollow-eyed man who had disappeared from their lives. "Michael," she whispered, and then she was running, throwing her arms around him, holding on as if she feared he might vanish again. That evening, at dinner in the Hendricks home, Michael watched as his sister folded seamlessly into the strange, wonderful family that had adopted him. Ryan and Laura had become more than employers. They were the bridge that had connected him back to life. As Einstein moved between them all, collecting pets and sneaking table scraps, Michael caught Laura's eye across the table. She smiled, a question in her look. "I'm good," he said quietly, answering her unspoken concern. And for the first time in years, he meant it. 1 year to the day after the river rescue, Michael stood on the pedestrian bridge where he'd first heard Einstein's desperate cries. The river below flowed peacefully now, nothing like the raging torrent it had been. Behind him, Ryan waited with Einstein, giving Michael the space he needed for this moment. Michael took the Medal of Valor from his pocket, the one he'd carried through homelessness, through despair, through recovery. For so long, it had been his only connection to his former self, the man he'd been before trauma changed him. He studied it in his palm, then carefully returned it to his pocket. Some symbols didn't need to be discarded but reinterpreted. The medal wasn't just about the past now. It was part of the journey that had led him here. Ready? Ryan called. Michael nodded, turning away from the river to rejoin them. Einstein bounded forward, circling Michael's legs once before leading the way back to the parking lot where Laura waited with their newest rescue, a shepherd mix named Apollo, another lost soul finding its way home. Someone at the center asked how I found you guys. Michael said as they walked. I told them I saved a drowning dog from the river, never realizing the owner would give me a home and job. He smiled slightly. They thought I was being poetic. Ryan laughed. Sometimes the truth is better than poetry. As they reached the car, Einstein nudged Michael's hand with his nose, a gesture that still carried the echo of that first connection on the riverbank. Michael knelt, bringing himself eye level with the dog who had changed everything. Thank you, he whispered, the words meant for Einstein but encompassing so much more. The Hendricks, the second chance, the universe that had finally tilted in his favor. Einstein simply licked his face once, as if to say, this is just what we do for each other. This is how we all find our way home.